welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I am your host, or one of your co-hosts. I'm Dr. Joe Hamlett, and my esteemed colleague here, smiling, Dr. Dave Peltz. So, how are you doing, Dr. Dave?
I'm doing good, Joe. I'm doing good.
All right, man. Well, thanks for all of those individuals who are returning to this podcast, or for those who are first time listeners. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully, you'll gain something from this experience. With that, just like we do normally, one of us introduce the topic, and then the other gets us going on our topic. So, I'm going to pass it off to Dave by introducing our topic. So, our topic today is career mapping. So, Dave, how can you get us started with career mapping?
Yeah, career mapping. It's easy enough. You should be able to figure out where you're at, and then you find out your street number and what city you want to go to, right? That's not
I
that kind
think
of
we
easy.
need
There's a
a
little
few more
bit.
details than
Okay.
that.
All right. Career mapping. So career mapping, that's a good one. We've been asked several times, what's the template, what's the recipe for creating a success model? And there are several components, and that's what we're gonna try to focus on, the different pieces of that. And one of them is the primary thing is having a goal. You have to
Right.
you have to have a
Yep.
destination. Um, Hence career mapping, a little play on words there. Uh, dry dry dad humor, I guess. But yeah, you need to have a goal, and Joe and I always recommend to write that goal down and be very specific. It doesn't have to be
Yep.
like a narrative or a novel or anything like that, but be specific on what you want, and set yourself up some dates to hit those goals by, like a schedule. So and the reason it's important to write those down is because something in the human brain says that it tells us that if we write something down, we're going to be more likely to commit to it and follow through
Yep.
with it.
Yep.
So that's one of the big pieces. After that, if you've never been to that destination before, you're essentially going to be reverse engineering it. Figuring out and identifying what pieces, what milestones you need to reach, what accomplishments you need to reach, what if there's education certifications, if there's locations, things you need to get spooled up on, trained on, whatever. You have to identify what those are, because that's going to then become part of that map. And I'm going to pause there because I could go on like this for hours, but that's not the purpose of being here today. So
Right.
I think that'll get us started, Joe. What are your thoughts? How jump in?
Yeah. So you bring up a very good point, or the initial part of this is the identifying what that goal is, what that achievement is, or that milestone you're trying to reach. Because it'd be like we've said many times before, you don't pick a destination and you just start driving. Eventually you get to the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's your final destination, that's okay. But typically it's probably not your destination. You just go in one direction. That'd be like me not identifying that I want to be a director in an organization, and just start getting certification, start
Mm-hmm.
going across the board, lateraling into positions, but with not any intent or being specific about what I'm trying to achieve. You
Mm-hmm.
can get all these certifications, you can get all these things, and then you haven't identified. So, what does it really mean? You can get some
Right.
IT certification, some HR certification, some project management. But if you haven't defined why you're doing those things, then you may be very knowledgeable now or
Yeah.
acquired a lot of skills, but how is that going to help you? So I think what you said, by identifying, again, if I want to be the director of IT,
Mm-hmm.
and that's my goal, my ultimate goal on my career map, then I need to start really focusing on, like Dave said, I need to now reverse engineer what that looks like. What is my current role? I
And make
might
sure,
be in.
yeah, and make sure it's pertinent, because if you want to be an airline pilot, I'm pretty sure learning how to be the best NASCAR driver is not going to really help you a
Right,
whole lot.
exactly. And that's actually where I was going to go. So if I want to be IT director, then am I at the IT help desk? Am I starting at, networking or infosec, whatever it takes to get my initial foot into the door, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then start to gaining those skills that you need, whatever the certifications are, advancing my position within that department or that division, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Do I move up to now network specialist or whatever those fields or whatever those titles are or roles within that division, and then
Mm-hmm.
continue to go from there. So that's when we think about, again, career mapping. We have a destination. So, like Dave said, now it's
What
taking.
are
Now we
what are
have
your
to take the
stops?
time to
Yeah.
right to identify the stops. Yeah, how do I need to go back to school, or
Mm-hmm.
do I just need to go get a certification? So those are
Right.
all those things you start to define
Yeah. And
once
if
you have
so, what
identified.
classes do you need to take? What certifications
Exactly.
do you need?
Exactly.
If you're wanting to be, familiarize yourself, let's say you want to get into some form of racing, are you utilizing the right vehicles, whether it be a bicycle or motorcycle, car, what have you, skateboarding? I mean, you have to identify the tools and then understand your budget because sometimes there's a cost associated with these
Right.
tools and
Yep.
these learnings. And the same goes for, with the personal life. If your goal is to have a family, what are you doing to work towards that? I mean, I guess you could be a couch potato and put your head in underneath the cushion and hope that someone comes along knocking on your door, but you might want to put yourself out there a little bit, So it's all about understanding what that goal is and what things need to occur in order to achieve that goal. And if you're not sure, reach out to a mentor or a coach or a trusted family member or peer. We talk about this a lot, your network, your support network, and get advice, get some guidance to help you understand what goes into some of these things, because your goal might have many milestones that go into it, and each one of those milestones might have many steps or things that you need to accomplish to get there. And those are things that you need to understand, and some places are better to learn things than others. I mean, I guess the desert's a great place to play hockey, but if you're wanting to be on the ice year round, it's maybe not the most ideal place to do it. There are other options. So,
Right. And again, I think you said something also that's key, because, and we've talked about this before, just the idea that sometimes we think, oh, we'll get there by ourselves.
mm-hmm.
But sometimes that's a long, hard road. And
Yeah.
like me and Dave always say, the long scenic route,
Mm-hmm.
why not get some assistance? And Dave mentioned it in the form of maybe a coach or a mentor, somebody that's been there, done that. And again, we're not expecting them to hand you the blueprint on
Mm-hmm.
how to get there, but they can hopefully add some, content that's going to help you consider, okay, maybe
Right.
they did it this way and it didn't work for them, or it took them this long. Maybe I'll take that advice or
Mm-hmm.
that information, apply it with this information, and then try this. But that's what it really is. Sometimes it is that trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've got some pertinent information, and I'll apply it to see if it works. And if it doesn't, I may have to go back to the drawing board, or I may have to find another mentor that maybe
Yeah.
have run into this obstacle. I think the common theme that we've probably been talking about in the last few episodes is mentoring or people
Mm-hmm.
to assist you with this. Because again, me and Dave have done a lot of this on our own, and it is a challenge. You learn a lot, you grow from it, but at the same time, it takes you a little bit longer to get there. And I've said this before too. I don't discount the experiences that I've had,
Mm-hmm.
because it has made me who I am. But I also think, and if I'd have had a little
Yeah.
assistance in certain areas or certain times of my journey, where would I be, or where could I be? Because
Yeah.
I've,
And you can have the best laid map to get from point A to point B,
absolutely,
but it is good to check with other people that have maybe done that,
yeah,
driven that route, because maybe they're going to say, yeah, don't take that road, take this road, or, oh,
right,
avoid that city because it's the traffic is horrible, or, oh, don't take that one because it's shut down. They're under construction.
right, yeah,
So, that's why it's important to reach out for advice. And yeah, Joe and I have made those mistakes. We've driven down those dead end roads, and hopefully they were more cul-de-sacs so we could just circle back out, but sometimes they're not, and you have to pick up, dust yourself off, and press forward. And it's important to identify those cities or stops because you're like when you're on a trip, you need to refuel. You have to put food in your belly, you have to put gas in the tank, you have to make sure all your documentation's in order if you're going to go to another country. I mean, there's a lot that goes into these things, and that's why we're utilizing the analogy of a map, because it really is. You look at a map and it's like, oh, there's the United States, and then you start drilling down, and there's a lot that can really be in those states, and to get from point A to point B just from one side of the state to another. Like, some states it only takes you about an hour to get through, like Rhode Island,
Right.
but
Yeah.
then there's other states that take you a good solid 36 hours. Texas, California,
Right.
east,
Right.
west, north, south. I mean, there's Alaska. I mean, you could get lost
Right.
there. So, well, in any of them, but there's you need to think these things out and come up with a good plan, and dig deep into it. Don't be afraid to dig deep and understand the options, because if you're an artist, what type of artist do you want to be? What do you want to be? A painter? Do you want to be a sculptor? Do you want to work in ceramics? Do you want to do metalworking, jewelry? I mean, the list goes on and on. Or do you want to understand a little bit of each before you finally make a decision? And that's okay too. So it gets back to Joe's point. Sometimes you need to try a few things before you actually hone in on what type of surgical physician you want to be.
Right.
I mean, there's different types. So, and there's different types of relationships. There's different types of houses and place that you can live. So this gets back to our critical self-reflection. You have to understand you
Right.
probably first of all, and then identify your goal, and then start pressing forward. But that advice piece is going to save you a lot of time, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that you don't have to shed in the process.
Well, and I was going to go back to that. So I'm glad you brought that back up, because I was going to go back to the point that, even though you've identified where you want to end up in your career, I think it's also still good to reach out to those people that know you well, those people that have seen you grow and develop, and maybe they can give you some insight that you may not be aware of. Because
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many people that I've seen, post on social media, or just heard personally say, well, I started down this path, and then I realized this is not really what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so, just what you said about that advice piece, or that, bouncing ideas off of people. Do you see me really doing this? And,
Mm-hmm.
and then them asking you the hard questions. Well, do you really enjoy that?
Yeah.
That may be
Are you
what you're
doing it
doing
for the right
today.
reasons?
Exactly. That's exactly it. Help,
Mm-hmm.
people helping you to understand, okay, yeah, that's what you're doing. That's what your parents wanted you to do. But is that what you really want to
Yeah,
do?
and
And
we've
that's what,
seen that a lot with a
absolutely.
lot of examples, especially like when we go into like pro athletes and entertainers. A lot of them came from very diverse backgrounds with different family upbringing and expectations, and that's the path that they didn't choose.
Yeah.
Some actors have gone off and joined the military, and athletes have gone off and joined the military after they've made their a certain level of success, and or vice versa.
Right.
So it just depends on who you are. Understanding who you are and what you want. And if you don't know, that's fine. Take some time to understand that before you start making those hard and fast goals and getting too far into it to realize it's not what you wanted, or not what you want to be, or who you want to be with, or where you want to live.
Right. No, and that's why I say I think we like to think that we have that in hand, but it doesn't hurt to get a little assistance from someone who knows you well. I mean,
Yeah.
you wouldn't go up to a total stranger and say, "Hey, should I be a race car driver?" I mean, but for those people that really know you, that have seen you for known you for a period of time, and have interacted with you, I think that's critical piece of that, because again, you can have in your mind, I'm going to go down this path, but after you start having that discussion, you realize, you know what, maybe I didn't
Yeah.
really want to do that. Maybe that was put in my head that, I should be this or be that.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
and
I've
and
had conversations
and
with a
don't be
lot of people.
overconfident or arrogant about your decisions, because the people that you're going to encounter that want to help you might be wanting to give you might have a rust bucket for a car, and they might be wanting to give you a new car or a better car that's not new. Don't be so arrogant. Be humble enough to accept that help, because it could save you a lot of time and effort. And they're trying to do that. They're trying to help you. I've seen so many times where people are like, no, I don't want that. I want to be able to do it on my own, on my
Right,
terms, and
right. Yep.
my stuff. And it's like, but those are the wrong tools for that job or for that journey.
Right,
Riding a bicycle from East Coast to West Coast, trying to do it in 24 hours, not the right vehicle. There are other
right.
vehicles that can help get you there quicker.
Well,
So it's, if that's what your goal is.
well, and that's why I keep going back to, we often think we can do it alone or we want to do it alone, but we also have to be humble enough to
Yeah, I was
know
just gonna
when
say
we
humble and
should,
gracious enough.
yeah,
Yeah.
to accept assistance.
Mm-hmm.
Again, at the end of the day, of course, we don't want, at the end of the day, you earn your degree and then someone says, hey, I helped them do that or I showed them how to.
Yeah.
No, we don't want
I
that.
did
But,
all that work for you. That's my degree.
right. But we do, want to recognize when people are genuine and want to help us because it is a long, lonely road if you try and do it yourself. But
Mm-hmm.
believe me or trust me, it's I've been there, and it takes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So again, not I don't we don't encourage you just to run out, give me a handout, but at the same time, we would encourage you to really think about when somebody's really trying to assist you because
Mm-hmm.
it makes a difference,
It does.
and
Having that
again, that's what
positive support is going to be critical because
absolutely
it's not going to be all peaches and roses and it's not all gloom and doom. But when it is peaches and roses, you want to be able to have someone there to support you and celebrate with you. And when it's doom
right,
and gloom, you need someone there to support you and help lift you up and keep you afloat so you don't go underwater,
right.
unless you're a scuba diver.
So, so back to career mapping, Dave brought up a couple of good points as far as identifying what that end state is or that goal is. He brought up critical self reflection. We've talked about having a mentor, someone assisting you. And, so when again, have identified that you want to be IT director, it may, and I've heard this more lately than I have heard it in the past. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we think of our climbing our career ladder,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, that we have to go from this level to the next level to the next level. And what I've learned, again, in this last year, so many times that, more people are talking more about some of the lateral
Mm-hmm.
learning that you might have to do to get you to that level because
Yeah.
and this is apparent in a lot of organizations where people grow up in that environment and then they just go straight up the ladder in that environment. So when they get to that high level position and they're gun ho about whatever that is or whatever organization they're leading, but they fail to understand that interaction amongst their peers and
I'm
their
glad
other
you brought that up, Joe,
organizations.
because
Um,
that's something that you and I have been talking a lot about offline
right.
is that siloing and the lack of
Yep.
communication
Yep.
and having a more holistic attitude or approach. It doesn't mean you have to be an expert in everything,
Right.
but you should be knowledgeable enough within your industry and your areas to understand that not only how something just impacts you, but how it impacts other
Right.
departments and organizations and vice versa. If they're going to make a change, you should have an idea of how that may impact you. And if you don't
Right.
know, then you
Yep.
need to ask those questions and have those conversations. And conversely, if you're an expert in your field, don't make the decisions without involving your counterparts because there may be some unforeseen consequences that could really negatively impact another department. IT might say, "Hey, we're going to purchase this new software application. It's going to save us so much time, save the company time." And then you get it, it's expensive, and then you realize you just derailed your supply chain organization and your
Right.
human
Yep.
resources department. Now you've created, it wasn't just 2.5 million for you. Now it's another 10 million with them to get them on
To
track. So you
recoup.
have
Right.
to have
Yep.
those conversations, understand what that schedule looks like, because you might be able to get yours done in 2 weeks. It might take them another 18 months to catch up. So what
Right.
have you lost? What productivity? How much net and gross income have you lost? How many clients have you potentially lost or upset? So then there's damage control. So you have to really think these things out. And I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because so many companies are looking for you to have a little bit more than just a level of expertise. They want you to understand, be able to demonstrate that you understand how your decisions will affect other entities.
Right. And so that's why I go back to, when you're defining your career map, that you maybe take some side or lateral movements into different areas that you're not familiar with, just so you have that larger breadth of information and knowledge that will help you, like they said, to make those
Absolutely.
decisions, and not in a silo. And we see that so often, that people get very good at what they know, but then they're really hurting or struggling to try and understand how that impacts everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge gap in a lot of organizations, where people, again, they can do their specific jobs and roles, to the T, no defects. But then when you ask them, how does that, interact or intertwine between your peers and your other organizations within the other departments within that organization. How does that interaction occur? How do you affect them, and how do they affect you? And so, again, when you're doing that career mapping, that you may not be able to go straight to the top. And like I say, it did make sense that now you start to maybe spend a little extra time down in this area, or lateral into another area that's going to help you understand, because it is about the big picture once you get to that position. Again, if you're a director of IT, like Dave just said, I can't just go out and buy this software product that we haven't all said, hey, I think we'll all interact well together, versus you grabbing this off the shelf and saying, hey, this is going to fit our purposes great. And then, as Dave said, now the other departments are trying to recoup and trying to catch up, or trying to integrate something that doesn't necessarily play well with the other systems. So
Yeah, and Joe, I again, I really am glad that you brought this up, because you've created a distinction between, is this knowledge that you need to acquire or skills that you need to acquire? Because sometimes it's just knowledge about how you
yeah,
affect someone. You don't have to be the IT director and a CPA,
right,
but you
yeah,
might need to be knowledgeable in finance for budgeting reasons, or vice versa. You might be the best HR person, human resources person, but you might need to understand how marketing works, a little bit. So you need to understand that when you're creating your map and you're identifying this end goal and these sub goals or milestones, what pieces do you need to learn, and is it a skill that you need to acquire, and to what degree of proficiency do you need it, or is it a level of knowledge, and to what degree of proficiency do you need to understand that topic?
I agree. Yeah. I'm glad you kind of outlined it that way. That the difference between experience and or skills and knowledge, because that's what I think we get hung up on,
Yeah.
is, do you have that expertise that I'm looking for,
Yeah.
and not that broad knowledge base that will help me. And so a lot of us, again, we grow up in these silos. I admit that's the way I was when I was an aircraft mechanic. All I could see was everything to do with maintenance, aircraft maintenance. That's the only thing that's important, until you start to realize, wait, we impact them this way, they impact us this way. And then when you start to open up that aperture and understand how we all interconnect, then you start to see when we're stepping on each other's toes, or you start to understand some of their concerns, and as well as they start to understand yours too. So,
And that's part of that. Again, that gets back to that whole mapping piece, identifying
yeah,
where you want to be, what is it going to take to get there, what are the sub steps to those steps, is it a skills based set that you need, or is it a knowledge based set? Sometimes it's just going on the internet, because that's like the most reliable thing out there, I guess. But but understanding what's out there, or do you really need to have a formal education in it, or do
right,
you actually need to get that formal education then start practicing it, like an attorney? So there's different degrees and different types of proficiency within knowledge and skill based type experience.
right.
So
Well, Dave, it looks like we're getting close to time. So, do you have any final thoughts about career mapping?
I would just say, keep a positive attitude and be flexible with yourself, be humble with others, and appreciative of their sharing. It doesn't mean you have to use it, but be appreciative and humble enough to accept their gracious offers, and be patient with yourself. It's going to take time. It's a trial and error. It's a process.
All right. Well, thanks for that summary. And I'll just add a couple more things. We've talked about it, like I said, in recent episodes more than not, but mentors, just those people that can assist you. Me and Dave always talk about that long scenic route, which is great. But at the same time, it is time consuming, and it does, make you who you are. But at the same time, I just really often think about, how I could have, if I would have had a little assistance, what my journey would have looked like. So as you're doing your career mapping, just make sure you're getting input, feedback from others, so that it's ultimately it's your decision and your achievements and your goals that you set for yourself. But at the same time, assistance is great because you can pick and choose what assistance that you use or whatever, but it's still helpful to have some other input and feedback from others. So with that, we want to thank you all for tuning in again to this episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. And again, if you know someone that might benefit from this type of information, please feel free to pass it on, share our information in the description down below. Or if you want to reach out to us, please do so. Again, me and Dave enjoy doing this. We get excited about this every week. So with that, we want to just encourage you to continue being your not so ordinary you.